What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Patrick Ropella. You can check him out at Ropella360.com. And Patrick, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes of the podcast people should check out. You know, it's interesting. We were talking before about Tony Horton. And Tony Horton, that was one of my favorite interviews because he was so down to earth. And what I like hearing about some of these stories are not like just the successes, but the challenges, right? And he talks about how he was, well, I won't even ruin it. People go watch Tony Horton, see some of the stuff he had to go through to get to where he was. Another good one was the co-founder of Zapier and their journey with Wade Foster. And it's also interesting, some of these companies, I had one of the co-founders of Pipedrive. At the time, I think they were 10,000 customers. Now they have over 100,000 customers. So to see their growth through that, and just a lot of great stories on InspiredInsider.com. You can check it out. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. Rise 25, we help businesses connect to their dream relationships and partnerships. We do that in a few ways. One, we're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the strategy, accountability, and the full execution and production. Number two, we're an easy button for a company's gifting. So we make gifting and staying top of mind to your clients, partners, prospects, even really gifts to staff from a culture perspective. And Patrick is the ultimate expert on this. People just give us a list of their addresses, their people. We do everything else. It's not like we send one-off gifts. We like to send a campaign of gifts. So think a gift every 3 to 4 months for 3 to 4 years, right? And so, Patrick, we kind of call ourselves the magic elves that run in the background to make it stress-free for companies and help them build amazing relationships. And really, that's the number one thing in my life. I'm always looking at ways on how I can give to my best relationships. And personally, I found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I admire, share with the world what they're working on the podcast, and then send them sweet treats in the mail. So check out rise25.com, email support@rise25.com. I am really excited to introduce Patrick Ropella. He has over 35 years of experience in founding and steering a global leading executive search firm, a private equity services firm, and an information research firm. You can check all of that out at Ropella360.com. He established Ropella Equity Ventures as his own PE investment firm, as I was saying. But Patrick has really contributed to the growth of some major global corporate technology organizations, such as General Electric, Georgia Pacific, Sony, Tyco, Nike, Clorox, Revlon, Baxter Labs, Johnson & Johnson, Shell. I mean, I can keep going on. But, Patrick, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Much appreciated. I'm looking forward to this.
Let's just start off, and you have a really fascinating background, but let's start off with Ropella 360, and I know you have different arms to it and what you're doing there.
Yeah, so we started executive search 40 years ago, started Ropella as a company about 35 years ago. When I first got into the business, the mentor that hired me, I went to a recruiting firm and said, hey, I'm looking to do something else. I've been a serial entrepreneur most of my career, and I'm now interested in doing something different, but I want to stay in sales and marketing. Can you get me some interviews? He said, sure, we can do that. He said, how about being a headhunter? And I said, no, you don't understand. I want to be in sales and marketing. And he says, well, that's the same thing. You don't get it. This is all we do, sales and marketing. I said, okay, that's interesting. So I joined the firm, but it took me a few months to start because I had to wind down some of the other businesses that I own. And when I showed up the first day of work, he says, well, what desk do you want to work? I said, what do you mean, what desk do I want to work? He said, well, you need to be a specialist. If you want to be hugely successful, specialize. I said, well, that makes a lot of sense to me. So I said, all right, I'll think about it. And he said, why don't you just take one of these desks that we have, the chemical industry, for example, and start there? And I said, what are you talking? I don't know nothing about chemicals. That's ridiculous. I never took any chemistry in high school or college. I'd be clueless. And he says, perfect. The less you know about the desk you're working, the more questions you'll ask. The more questions you ask of the executives you're recruiting or the clients you're serving, the more they'll love you. Basically, How to win friends and influence people. You talked about gifting. That's a powerful way to do it. If you apply that in connection at the hip to asking people to talk about what they want to talk about most, which is usually themselves, that's the winning recipe. So that's how I got started. And now 35 years later, 5 years of working with this first firm, and then 35 years of working on my own, we've become the world's largest, most well recognized 400-pound gorilla of the chemical industry executive search. So that's where we do most of our work, but we also do a lot of our work in what you would describe as general industrials. With a lot of those companies you mentioned, they're not necessarily into chemicals, but they're involved in manufacturing something. So general industrials, corporate technology, manufacturers is our core.
You mentioned a couple things here which I think are really instructive. One, I wish someone told me that early on about really specializing in niching. That's such an important lesson. I still talk to a lot of people, I'm sure you do too, about still struggling with that and how important that is. And then, the second piece is just asking questions and caring about the other person. I love the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I'm not sure. I'm curious, any other favorite books, resources on your end that you've liked throughout the years for leadership or business?
Oh, think and grow rich, and how to win friends and influence people is the foundation that every high school kid and at a minimum, every college kid should be forced to read. But then as you start growing and developing your career, understanding how to be either a part of helping grow great companies or being the leader who is responsible for that, is going to lead you to, good to great, for sure. Um, Good to Great, Jim Collins is probably one of the best, most recognized books for, building great companies. And that book applies whether you're building great corporations or nonprofits or teams, like NFL teams. The teams with the best talent win. Um, that's a sports metaphor, but it applies in corporate America or in nonprofits or even in a church just as equally. And so I've spent my whole career focusing heavily on reading books are all about execution, like Ram Shriram and Larry Bossidy's incredibly good book. They talk extensively in that book about the power of not strategy, the power of execution, and how important people are to the center core of execution. If you have B players or C players on your team, you're going to know you've got problems with execution very fast. But if you focus on hiring A players, you're never going to have problems with execution because A players are masters of execution. They are performance driven, results, stats. Tell me how I'm doing. I don't need you to tell me what I'm doing wrong because I'm smart enough to realize that. Tell me how I can do better. You got A players when all they're asking about is, how can I do better? And that's the power of execution, having the right people on the team, which goes back to good to great. Identify the bus, get the right seats on the bus, then get the right people in the right seats.
Yeah, I'm pulling this up. I feel like I've heard of this book. I need to add this to my Audible,
Oh,
Patrick, which is
absolutely. Yeah.
Execution, the Disciplines of Getting Things Done. That's a great suggestion. I love that.
Great book.
I want to hear about the evolution of your services, and we'll dig deep into. I know you have a lot of things to talk about hiring A players. You have a lot of things to talk about leadership transformation and then the acquisition hunting side. But talk about the evolution of, okay, I could see how you started in the executive search. At what point do you add these other
Yeah.
service lines and how'd
Yeah.
that come about?
So I learned very early in life that sales is not sales. Sales is a conclusion of relationship building. Relationship building is the core of everything I am. And you're going to hear that as we talk about this from the entry level. We all call it sales. Go out and convince the customer they need what you've got, and then take them out for dinner and start building a relationship. No. Now focus on building the relationship, and the sale will take care of itself. Completely flipping that on its head. It's easy to say that. It's not easy to do until you mature. Young people are not relationship builders on steroids. They grow into those roles over time and experience. But when you build relationships in the executive search model, everyone thinks you're building it with the client and you're placing executives into the client's organization. And the executives you're placing are just part of the package. They're the transaction that you're carrying to the company. No, it's not. Relationships are just as important on the hiring side for the candidates as they are for the clients. And it's funny how, as you evolve from filling entry level roles, sales reps, chemists, engineers in these companies you're working with, and you're young in the business, you don't think of the candidates as anything more than the transactional component of filling the search. But as you get more experience and you start climbing up the ladder, you're working with hiring managers as candidates, managers, directors, VPs, who are also involved in hiring prospective clients. So very quickly after, well, wait a minute, I need to treat these people, these hiring candidates, these talented people, just like their clients, and give them just as much value as I do the clients, because guess what? Tomorrow they might be a client. And when I started thinking like that, my approach to treating the candidates was transformational. And it became clear because we kept getting repeat business from the candidates who were saying, you know what? All the headhunters I work with always treated me like I was just a piece of meat, like all the other candidates that they had as alternative pieces of meat. But you made me feel like I was a super important part of this process. You made it clear that it's important for me to make the right career decision, just as importantly it is for the client to make the right hiring decision. So I wrote a book called The Right Hire, and in it I talked heavily about the right career. They're both hand in glove. If you ever read What Color's Your Parachute by Richard Nelson Bowles, he nails it. He talks about the importance of understanding where you would fit in best as you go through career transition, especially for middle-aged people that are leaving a career that they got trapped into early on because it was just they fell into it, but they didn't really realize it was never really good fit for their personality, their skill sets, the location. They just weren't passionate about it, but they were trapped in it because they kept climbing the ladder. And then they realized they were tired of being trapped and they wanted to do something completely different. The right hire and the right fit are equally important. And so that's all about relationship building. So how did I transfer from all of that on the executive search side to these other businesses when I realized that we're dealing with people, whether we're looking for executives to put into corporations, or we're looking for board members to put into private equity firms, or we're looking for subject matter expert consultants who can serve in interim consulting roles for either corporations or private equity, or we're looking for people to do acquisition hunting and more. When we're looking for these people, we're just super connectors. We're not headhunters. We're not acquisition hunters. We're not interim executive placement. No, we are super connectors. And it's all about just building relationships and getting to know these people and what's important to them, what they're interested in as people is what creates opportunity intersections. And when you stop thinking about the fees and the transactions that you're involved in, you start focusing on, hey, how can I help you? You become a world changer. And that's what differentiates us significantly from the great majority of people we compete with. The testimonials, the endorsements we get say, hey, you know what? Ropella is really unique. They're extremely well connected in the industries that we're involved in. They have incredible processes for what they deliver, whether it be executive search or company search, etc. But they're just incredible relationship builders. If you want somebody to help connect you to people you can't get through doors to, these guys are so great at relationship building, they can open up any door to anybody. That's who you want to work with. And once I figured that all out, it was very easy for me to go, you know what? I can sell executive search services to Nike, Johnson & Johnson, all these big companies. But I can also sell those same services to some really important, really awesome middle market companies that have serial entrepreneurs who are rock stars in their industries and have a lot of fun too. And often I make a greater impact when I'm serving the middle market companies than I do the big companies. Because I'm dealing with CEOs that have incredible world-changing capabilities that could, in the next 5 years, be a public company, that could be a private equity acquisition, and with that, funding and support, become incredibly great companies. So I love working with small to medium-sized companies as well.
Patrick, talk about, so we're looking, if you're watching and listening to the audio, there is a video component and we're on the Ropella 360 website. If you want to check out the book, you can go to, backslash the dash right dash hire and you can see the book here. And I'd love for you to talk about, and there's some incredible testimonials here from, we have CEO of Procter and Gamble, the CEO chairman of Dow Chemical Company. And in the book, you do talk about the smart search system.
Mhm.
Um, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the smart search system was a book that took, a system that took me about 15 years to really refine to the level where I now show it, the smart search system, to prospective clients who are looking for people for board seats or for senior executive roles. The people that report to the C-suite or the C-suite leaders who are hiring people around them, um, and or for interim executives, etc. It's incredibly unique because I focus it on attracting A players. And that is not something the great majority of people on the planet understand how to do. If you're an A player, you understand the importance of how you make decisions and how you consider opportunities and how you reject all those opportunities, or you make decisions to pass on things. And it's often on a unique set of circumstances. A players will say, I'm interested in making a career change, or I'm interested in hiring another person to help me grow this company based on the relationship building skills of these people. So a lot of soft skill stuff based on their ability to communicate performance and energy, their ability to lead as part of a team, roll up their sleeves and get the team excited to win a Super Bowl. These are all soft skills. How they think about making a career transition or hiring somebody else, it's got to be a cultural fit, not only for me, the person who's going to be doing that work, but it's important for the team that's going to hire me that I'm a cultural fit, but it's also got to be a cultural fit for me, a leadership fit. I've got to know that the people I'm going to be working with, I'm going to really enjoy working for, and that I can count on them to get my back and to partner with me on achieving the goals that they want to accomplish there at that new company. This is dramatically different than hiring somebody just to fill a hole. Everyone talks about filling these searches, placing these people. We don't talk about that. We talk about solving searches. We talk about understanding the ideal leadership profile and having a clear sense of where you want to be 5 years from now and what are the types of people that are going to get you there faster with less problems. Those are A players, and A players are Super Bowl champions. How do you get them? Good luck with that if you don't know how to communicate the way they think.
Talk about Nike for a second and what happened with them. And I'm just going to point people to, you could check out Ropella360.com, the smart search system, if you want to dig a little bit deeper, because you could see there's, sourcing, marketing, assessing, recruiting and retention and transformation. And there's different kind of stages here. But what happened with Nike?
Yeah, so that's a really good segue. Nike, think of them as a recruiting organization, could recruit anybody. What the heck would they need a headhunter to help them with recruiting for? They've got Michael Jordan, they've got Tiger Woods, they've got some of the best athletes on the planet already as their ambassadors. They've got world-class talent because it's very easy for them to recruit. But they were building out a new innovation team, what they were calling an innovation kitchen. They wanted to get beyond t-shirts and tennis shoes and get into electronics wearables, fabrics that are going to adapt to the players' temperature and sweat and all those kind of issues. They wanted to transform their manufacturing globally from kids in sweatshops in Asia, which they were starting to get beat up over, to let's use robotics and technology and bring a lot of those jobs back to the US, which is what they've now done. And how do you do that if you don't have an innovation think tank? Nike didn't have an innovation think tank. They had some smart people that were developing tennis shoes and t-shirts and clothes and that kind of thing. But they wanted to do a whole new level. And they wanted to look at polymers, plastics, specialty chemicals. They wanted to look at electronics. They wanted to look at all of these other technology basis and say, let's bring the world's best scientists and innovators from those companies and help us re-retrofit our manufacturing, our innovation, and our technology. So that took them out of their comfort zone. They didn't have headhunters or recruiters in-house that could go target those companies. So they went out and looked for a search firm that specialized in those industries. And they brought in for evaluation about 15 different firms. Some of the big dogs like Korn Ferry, Heidrick, and Russell Reynolds got in, a few other good boutique firms, and a few people they had worked with on other searches internally that were their friends, people they liked working with, were all put in the pool and said, okay, why should we hire you to help us build this team? They had just hired one of my clients. Myron was the chief technology officer at Dow. And he was offered this opportunity to come to Nike and run this innovation team. And in that title, that I think he was more like a VP of innovation for one of the divisions, not the head of Dow's technology. But as a division head, that would be a classic title. And so he took that title from Nike and said, "Great, I'll run your innovation team." And there's a recruiter you should talk to, Ropella. He's done a lot of work for me at Dow. And so that opened up the door. Well, I got in there and I went through the process of showing them the Smart Search system. I said, listen, you guys can hire anybody. You know how to do it. But let me show you how to do it differently. If you really want world-class talent for this innovation team, what we would describe as A players, you've got to communicate them in a highly unique way. And you guys have marketing teams galore. You got anything like this you use when you're recruiting what we call an opportunity marketing piece, which is part of our Smart Search system? And they looked at it and said, no, we've never seen anything like this before. I said, well, if you're going to go after and recruit Super Bowl players to join your team, or college football athletes to come join Auburn or leave Auburn and go to another team, anybody knows that, Auburn's head coach is the world's leading coach. And the success that he and that team have had is because they're incredible at marketing their opportunity. That's what we do. We take the best of Nike and we put it into a presentation that says, this is what it'd be like to work at Nike with this type of leadership team. This is what their culture is like. This is what they're trying to solve, where they want to go, their performance objectives and metrics. This is how you communicate to A players. And if you want to get those people interested, you can't go to them with a black and white position description with a color logo slapped on it and say, good enough. It's not going to cut it. These are busy guys, very successful, and they're only interested in working with A players. If they see these opportunity marketing pieces coming from us, they're going to say, Ropella is pretty unique. They must be really good at what they do. They must be A players. I want to learn more. And then we present you in your situation in such a way that now they're engaged. They want to learn more. They want to come forward. So how you market to A players is hugely different than how everyone else does. And that's where it all starts. The Smart Search system is heavily focused on marketing to the A players, and then properly assessing, properly motivating these candidates to stay engaged through to the finish line. If you drag out a long hiring process that's bureaucratic, multiple interviews, and you're interrogating the candidates instead of partnering with them on making the choice together that this is the right fit for both parties, you'll lose them left and right. So it's a pretty unique model.
Patrick, I see the executive search arm, and I want to talk about the acquisition hunting arm for a second. And on the topic, I'm just going to pull up your site again here. You have another book. Obviously, we have The Right Hire, but you have Pathways to Private Equity Partnerships here. So I want to hear about how this arm came about, but I do want to point out, the book here. You can get it on Amazon as well if people want to check it out. But you've, again, have some incredible people endorsing the book. You have Jim Collins of Good to Great. You have some of my favorite authors here, Marshall Goldsmith here, Vern Harnish. He's been on the podcast. That was a good one. Richard Wilson. That was a good episode also on the podcast. Sam Reese, CEO of Vistage, Ted Clark. I mean, some incredible people here. Adam Coffey, Mark Thompson. What's a good story from the book that you can talk about? Yeah.
So how did I get from executive search to company search, which is what we're talking about? One of the books on there. Oh, perfect segue. Ted Clark. Ted Clark is a godfather of the coatings industry. For many years, Ted was building through what's described a buy and build model, a company from the very bottom. He started as a janitor in this company, rose to the CEO of this company, and then took over as the CEO and built it into one of the largest coatings companies, coatings and adhesives companies in the country through what's called a buy and build model. And while he was doing that, many times I would work for some of the companies that he was acquiring, providing services, executive search to those companies, and got to know Ted and his success and his background. And so I went and interviewed Ted in Memphis and said, Ted, I want to understand, you just created this new private equity firm. Why? What are you going to do with that? And how are you guys going to scale and grow that? And he said, well, we're going to do the same thing I did. We're going to look for companies that could be, great companies with private equity support if they have the right leadership. We don't want to acquire these companies and replace all their leaders like most private equity firms do. We want to acquire the best companies with the best leadership and scale and grow them through a buy and build model where we keep those leaders in place and we reinforce their strengths, we delegate their weaknesses, and together we build another great company, a rinse and repeat of something they've done before. We're going to do that again. And I thought, well, that's a really cool model. Well, while I was talking to Ted about that, I was also talking to a lot of private equity firms about how they were buying and building and how they were scaling companies. And I found out there's a special program called Executive Partners. That's kind of the core. Some call it backable executives, some call it active chairman's roles inside of private equity firms. And the concept is that with a private equity firm, instead of going out and just looking for the acquisitions to make, stop. First, go find an acquisition hunter who is a godfather of that industry lane, who has a thesis that they want to rinse and repeat. In other words, they've already built a transportation logistics company very successfully once and then sold it, then did it again and sold it. And during that process, worked with multiple private equity firms. So they understand private equity extremely well. They understand how to build and buy and grow companies through organic growth, but as well through inorganic acquisitions. And they've now gotten to a point in their life where they don't want to be the CEO anymore. They're done with that. But they would love to be a part of coaching a CEO, a leadership team, and working with that team to do a buy and build again. And then 5 years, 10 years down the road, it becomes such a successful company, a valuable company that it can be sold to the next private equity firm and everybody walks away with a significant win. Okay? So the combination of working with Ted and working with some world-class private equity guys that do executive partnering, the lights went off. And I thought, wait a minute, there's an opportunity for me. This is executive search. I do executive search for corporations that want key leaders. I do executive search for private equity firms that want key leaders inside their private equity holdings. Why can't I go do executive search to find them, those backable executives? And I built a model, much like the Smart Search system for executive search, to do the Smart Search system for executive partner search, which is just people talking to people, super connecting. And when I built that model, I started to submit it as a thesis. That's a business plan to these private equity firms. And they're like, yeah, if you could do that for us, the way you do it on the other side of the fence, where it's hyper specialized, heavily relationship driven, and you're able to get us the godfathers of these industry lanes to come talk to us, we'll pay you well for that. And we'll be a very happy client. And that's how I evolved. And I, through a few years of doing that work, developed best practices for doing that work, wrote the book primarily for the executives that are now retired that want to do this type of work but don't understand that there is a model for doing it like this. I wrote that book for them, and I use it as a tool when I recruit these people from all these various industries to come join private equity as a way for them to understand, hey, what you did before was really cool, but what you can do now is off the charts. In partnership with me and a private equity firm, there's a whole lot more support we can provide you that you didn't have when you were doing it inside of your corporation. It's a cool model. Pretty exciting stuff.
I want to talk about water treatment, the sexy topic of water treatment when it relates to this. But I do want to point out not only your book, you have a couple other recommendations here, right? You have Buy and Build. We're looking the Buy and Build CEO Ted Clark. You also have the Private Equity Playbook, Adam Coffey. You have Backable, Sunil Gupta, and Deconstructing Conflict. So I just wanted to point a couple of those are some of your recommendations on your Ropella 360 bookstore.
Yeah, those are all related to if you're going to be doing acquisitions and you want to do it with a buy and build model, these are books that are foundational for you to understand what you're going to be dealing with when you go through the process of convincing investors, convincing the founders and the CEOs at the companies that you're targeting to acquire, how you're going to deal with the family dynamic that's involved in a lot of these acquisitions. Each one of these books plays a part in you building the foundation of being a world-class acquisition hunter. And they'll all say, well, I already am. I've already done this incredibly well. Yeah, but if had you had a chance to read these books before you did this last time, imagine how much more successful you would have been then. It's not too late. If you're interested, read them. They're great books. And behind each one of these books is an advisor that I have a relationship with that if at any time we want to bring into the process, we can do that too.
So water treatment, the sexy topic in niche of water treatment.
Woohoo, water treatment. Most people take
It is sexy, actually. I mean, if you think about it, right? I was thinking,
most people take it for granted.
I was like cleaning my water bottle this morning, and I'm like, a lot of people don't have clean water, right? And that can get people very, very sick. So, how does this relate to the acquisition hunting?
Yeah, so it just so happens water treatment is incredibly important to the health of our society. And if you don't know that, you'll recognize this word, Legionella's disease. Legionella disease, I think that's what it's called. Anyway, buildings in New York City have these huge air conditioning units on the top of their buildings. And they get bacteria in those AC units. And when the AC units aren't properly maintained, that bacteria can get in the air, especially up high, and then it falls down onto the people walking on the streets. Bacteria can get into water bottles, as simple as that, but it can get into hospital injectables, needles, the plastic bags that are holding the drugs. It can get into all sorts of different places where it does not belong. And water treatment is the tool that's used to control a lot of this bacteria. So it doesn't sound too sexy, but it's a major part of why, you know, we survive packed into these huge cities with millions and millions of people right next to each other, control of bacteria through water treatment. And that could be the water that's coming from waste streams like toilets. It could be water treatment that's coming from processing food in plants. When you think about the amount of water that's used to clean foods before it's packaged, it's unbelievable. All that's water treatment. Now, why are we talking about that? Well, one of the campaigns that we were retained by a world-class private equity firm to run was a water treatment thesis to find an acquisition hunter to focus on going out and finding a bunch of acquisition prospects in the water treatment lane so we could do this buy and build model. And what's kind of a neat success story is that, yes, we went out and found a large group of people that would be interested in doing the acquisition hunting that had backgrounds in water treatment. We narrowed it down to about 5 that were clearly scoring very high on our scorecard we use. We have 10 items that we score, and every item on the list has 10 points. If you score, above 80% on that scorecard, you're somebody that we would submit to our private equity client. If you score any below, you're probably not going to get an interview. The finalists were all scoring close to 100%. They're incredibly strong water treatment CEOs who have been in the business most of their career, that had built and sold multiple times, had done a lot of work with private equity. So they're all godfathers. We narrowed it down to the one they selected, and the one they selected had never worked with somebody like me before doing acquisition hunting, had never had the experience of having my support mechanism and team behind them. And within 6 months, we had a large amount of prospects on the table for them to consider, platforms and the smaller bolt-ons, with the idea that now they've got a whole bunch of puzzle pieces they're working with to build their next company. And we made our first acquisition. We're now closing our second, have a few more that are going towards what they call letters of interest, and then they'll go, if that looks logical to letters of intent, formal offers, and the expectation being here within another 6 months to 8 months, they'll have a significant number of companies that they're now integrating, and we'll have had a huge success story to talk about in record time.
You know, talk about a few things on that checklist.
Yeah.
I don't know. I want like there should be like a separate book, Patrick, on this, like the Godfather scorecard or something. It's
It's in
just
the
like,
book.
oh,
It's
is
in
it
the
in the book?
package. Oh yeah.
The
Oh
whole
yeah.
thing's in the book.
I wrote this book so these guys would understand when I'm interviewing them how I'm scoring them and how my private equity
The
clients are
Pathways to Private Equity
scoring
book,
them. Yeah.
partnerships. Okay,
Partnerships, private equity.
nice.
Inside there, the scorecard talks about, hey, number one, you have to be an industry rock star. You have to have spent the majority of your career in this industry lane so that when I introduce you to founders, CEOs, other private equity firms, they're going to look at you and say, yeah, that guy really knows that business inside and out, left to right, Sunday, to Saturday. They're living that business and have most of their career. So they have to score very high on the industry lane. They have to score very high on their passion towards doing another buy and build in that industry lane. They have to score very high on their communication skills, their ability to present themselves and to talk about their success without bragging about it for a half hour and getting caught up in all their trappings of success. They just need to build credibility, 3 minutes, and then let go and talk to the founder about what he wants to talk about most. And guess what that is? Himself and where he's standing. They have to score very high on IQ and EQ. And then they also have to score very high on their availability. Are they conflict free? Do they have conflicts of interest, non-competes, other investments that are going to get in the way? If they have all those issues, their score is going to fall. And they also have to be available. Do they have the time, the bandwidth? These are mostly retired executives. We're not taking 40-year-old, 50-year-old guys and doing this. We're taking 50-year-old guys at the youngest, 60 and 70-year-old guys, because they're the godfathers. They're the ones that people look at and say, oh my God, you can get me a conversation with that guy? I'm this lowly small business, and they're not, but they're kind of thinking that. Why would they want to talk to me? They can help me solve all sorts of problems. They can help me think differently about all sorts of issues. They could help me explore all sorts of opportunities. They're willing to talk to me. Hell, I'd be stupid not to talk to them. And that's our approach. We get these people that score very high on a lot of these traits. And we say, okay, you scored high. Now let's take you through the process and make sure you're comfortable with the private equity sponsor that I'm going to be working with you on this one with. And if you're not, then it's not a win. It's got to be a win for you, for them, and for me. There's a three-way partnership. And so we did this with the water treatment lane, proved to be very successful. We're doing it in a bunch of other lanes. We've got about 10 different executive partners that are all doing this work in partnership with me and a separate private equity firm.
I love it. I want to get to leadership transformation, and accountability, trust. Talk about that for a second. And I don't know if we want to talk about the CIA.
We can, but I'll have to kill you.
Exactly.
Well, let's jump into that, and I'll boil that ocean by saying, hey, I've had the unique luxury, the unique benefit of having worked for many Fortune 500 CEOs, many middle market CEOs, some of the world's leading venture capitalists and private equity guys. I've got a pretty unique first class seat. It's not just working with them or interviewing them. I'm working with them on solving some serious issues related to talent. And when you're talking to them about what they're struggling with and why they're looking to replace people or why they're looking to build a world-class team, adding people, they just lost somebody that's been a dear friend who's now retiring, and they're frustrated. They're losing all that intellectual capacity. That superpower brain is leaving, and they're like, oh God, I got to start all over and replace them. Hiring can be a very stressful, very emotional, very frustrating experience. I was on the phone yesterday with a world-class CEO who's acquired 50 companies throughout his career, and 25 of them on his own as his own private equity firm. And he says, I don't know how to hire. I suck at it. I keep making the same mistakes over and over. I don't care how experienced you are. Hiring A players is a special art. There is a science behind hiring called the Smart Search system is the science behind hiring. There's also an art behind it, especially when you're going after A players. And so I'm dealing with these people, and they're opening up to me in ways they never opened up to anybody else. They don't tell their wife they sucked at hiring. They don't tell their friends that they're really kind of emotionally frustrated that they lost this key person they thought was going to be with them through the next 5 years, is now left and gone to a competitor. So what's the point? Hiring is super important, and so is leadership. They go hand in hand. And when I work with executives that are telling me, hey, I'm a vice president and I'm looking for a director to report to me. My CEO may come into the interview. I'm like, I'm not sure we're the right partner. They're like, what? What are you talking about? I thought you wanted to work for us. I said, no, no, no. I want to work with you. But if your CEO doesn't take seriously this level of a hire, you guys got a problem that I'm not sure I can help you fix. So we need to talk about leadership. And leadership starts at the highest levels with accountability, communications, and trust. And if you're going to hire A players, you've got to understand how important that accountability, communication, and trust is to the A players you're hiring. And if they can't have visibility to your CEO on the front end during the hiring process, they're probably not going to be there at the offer stage. The best A players, when they're on the field, have an offensive line or a defensive line coach that helps them during the game. But before the game and after the game, they have access to the head coach. They have access to the general manager. They have access to the owner of the team. If they don't, they're probably not going to last on your team very long because they're going to get frustrated and go look for that elsewhere. It's the same in corporate America. So accountability, communication, and trust, what's that all about? Well, it's what we call action leadership. When the Twin Towers went down, during that process, you had all these world-class leaders. You had the CIA, the FBI, the Secret Service. You had the mayor, Rudy Giuliani. You had the chief of police for the New York City Transit Authority. You had the coroner's office. You had the ambulances and the police. And you had a ton of first responders that all showed up at that scene. You remember all the lights flashing everywhere. There were hundreds of first responders there with their lights flashing at the bottom of those towers, all pissing on each other for control over the scene. This is a crisis. I am in charge, is what every single leader that was there was saying. And they were all arguing over what should happen while they were forgetting that there's issues that we need to be dealing with. Get these people out of the building. Get the people out of the neighborhood before the buildings collapse. Nobody thought about the fact that buildings would collapse. What do you do when you've got all this chaos going on and everybody's fighting for control? Not much good. So after the towers came down, Congressman Peter King got together with some other leaders and said, hey, we need to come up with a better way to manage a terrorist attack like this should it happen again, which it likely will. We've got to have better command and control. We've got to break down these silos. We've got these first responders. They're all A players. They're all lions fighting for control. We've got to work with them ahead of time to help them understand that just because you're the guy with the biggest badge or the biggest title doesn't mean you should be the one in charge of this situation. The best leader is often the one you least suspect should be the one that should rise to the key role of responsibility. And so we were working with Congressman Peter King and the chief of police for the New York City Metropolitan Transit Authority, because I had a 4-star Air Force general on my board who was his brother-in-law. So you've got, I can't name names, but you've got this person and this person who are brother-in-laws who are very high-level guys in regards to crisis management, threat management, dealing with challenging environments. And I had another 4-star general on my board who was the one who led the first and second Iraqi wars. He was the guy on TV next to Colin Powell and General Schwarzkopf talking about, you see our bombs coming? This is our win. Okay? World-class guy. Very well recognized as one of the best generals in modern history. He's on my board. And then I got the Air Force general that runs Air Force One on my board. And I started saying, Congressman Peter King is telling the chief of police in New York City, we need to come up with a training program to help break down the silos and to get people communicating more effectively. I've got a best-selling author on my board who's also a leadership rock star, who's written 10 books on leadership. And I've got a bunch of Fortune 500 CEOs that are really world-class leaders who I could bring to an advisory board, and together we could build this program. So I went back to the two brothers-in-law and said, "Hey, how about you get us an audience, and let's see if we can, for the Department of Defense, because they were the ones paying the tab, build a leadership program. And here's what we're going to call it: Action Leadership. It's all about accountability, communication, and trust." And the guys that built the Thayer Leadership Group for West Point were some four-star Army generals who were in Pensacola. While I'm talking about this, they rise up and say, "Hey, we'd be interested too." And then a couple of Secret Service guys, who one of which was the director of the Secret Service under Ronald Reagan when Reagan was shot, hears about it and says, "I'd be interested too." Just so happens in Pensacola, you can throw a rock in any direction and you're going to hit a first responder from the highest levels in the military or in the government, because they all come back to retire there. There's a lot of that foundation in the Pensacola area because of all the military bases, and they're all over the place. So I was able to very quickly pull together a world-class team: accountability, communications, and trust. What makes relationships happen? What's the spark that brings relationships together? Usually it's commonalities, like how you think about sports and you talk to each other about that. How you talk to each other about hobbies. You talk to each other about goals and problems and opportunities. You talk to each other about politics. Those are all commonalities that bring together relationships and make them spark and start growing. Those are the seeds that get the trees planted. What keeps them together and makes them last? Accountability, communication, and trust. Over time, you learn to hold each other accountable and to let the issues that make personality sticky, just set them aside. But let's hold each other accountable. Let's communicate effectively, even if we're frustrated with each other. Let's have a communication model that says we can talk through anything, even if you're a whiny pain in the ass and I'm a crotchety old fart. If we learn to communicate effectively, we can work through anything. But ultimately, let's trust each other that we're authentic. Let's trust each other that we both have differences in opinion, we're both wired differently, but that ultimately we've got each other's backs. So we built all these modules around accountability, communication, and trust, and we took them back to the Department of Defense and to what was called the Applied Science Foundation for Homeland Security, which was an organization that was created to do two things. One, create better communication systems, better radios, better interconnectivity, better cameras, better security systems, you name it, to make sure that if there were going to be another terrorist attack, that all of that communications technology was the same for the FBI and the CIA and the Secret Service and the police departments and the fire departments, etc. They were all on completely different platforms. And they said, enough of this crap. Let's use our buying power to get the absolute best technology and to use the Internet of Things to connect it all together. And they did. So if you ever watched the TV show 24, they built the first 24 platform in the basement of one of the Department of Defense contractors' buildings. By the way I say basement, we're talking about at the bottom of a fallout shelter, where to get to it, we have to go through an elevator with fully armed special forces operators at the door. To get into that elevator, we get out about a minute later. So think about how deep we're going. We get out a minute later, and at the door is another crew of special forces operators that pat you down before you get out of the elevator. And then we're in the 24 control center, the command and control center. And that's where we did our training. We brought together 100 special response leaders for 7 different sessions, charged them $2,000 a person to come to the event, and had 100 people each time we were there. So you can run the math. Very profitable, very serious leadership program, all based on accountability, communication, and trust. So I've had the opportunity to, like I say, interact with all these CEOs. So I brought a lot of my ideas to the program, but I had this world-class advisory team of rock star leaders. And I kept saying, hey, listen, you guys, I bring them into my boardroom in my building in Pensacola. And I have this beautiful conference table in this huge room that could seat 20 people. And I say, Remember, before we get started, I am the ringleader. I've got a whip here on my desk. You guys are the lions, but we are going to get along. You all have great ideas, but we're not going to talk on top of each other. We're going to listen to each other, and we're going to end up at the end of the day coalescing all these ideas. And they all just look at me. Who the hell do you think you are? I said, I'm the ringleader. I got a whip here. Don't you forget that. We had a blast. It was a lot of fun.
I see, Patrick, the common theme with all of this, whether it's, the acquisition, hunting, the leadership transformation, or hiring A players, is just surrounding yourself with A players.
Absolutely.
Right. And on the leadership transformation, talk about Commonwealth fusion systems.
Yeah. This is an incredibly unique company. If you don't know who Commonwealth Fusion Systems is, you need to. Everyone has heard of nuclear fission. That's where we put the rods down in and they're radioactive and they create heat and energy, and we create these huge complexes with hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. Yeah, more like billions and billions of dollars to build these massive complexes that everybody is scared to death of. Nuclear is going through a renaissance. It's much safer than everyone ever imagined it could be. It's now being able to be built on much smaller scales. It's an incredible energy platform, but it's nothing like what fusion is. Fusion takes the sun and the reaction in the sun and brings it down to the earth and controls that in a way that we don't kill everybody on the planet. Everyone's like, oh my God, how do you bring the heat and the pressure and the reaction in nuclear fusion that goes into a sun onto the earth and not kill everybody? It's controllable. It's like a light switch. You can turn it on and off. You can't do that so much with nuclear fission. It's also a whole lot less expensive. Once it's commercialized, you can put it in the size of a Walmart. It doesn't create any pollution. It's heat that's controlled with magnets, controlled in a reactor that you can turn up and turn down as you need energy. So it's modular. You can break it down and move it around. You can put it on the back of trucks once they scale it down smaller and smaller and drive it into environments where a hurricane has just knocked out all of the power in a statewide or a regional area. So Commonwealth Fusion Systems. Well, this is a commercial company. This isn't a government entity. ITAR in Europe is the leader there. Argonne National Labs and Oak Ridge National Labs and the Energy Lab in the US is a consortium of companies that have worked on it here in the US. And then you got China working on it. So you got three major government efforts that are working on it from a governmental perspective. And then you've got about 20 small businesses that are working on parts of fusion commercially. But Commonwealth by far and away is the leader. They've got Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Mark Benioff, guys like that, from Salesforce, these world-class billionaires that are all investing in this, including now Google has just poured tons of money into it. They've raised, I think they're getting close to $4 billion to build a commercial version of a reactor and to have it up and running. It'll be the first time in history that we've had a commercial reactor up and running. They're partnering with every company on the planet to share ideas, open source, much like Tesla did when they built their platform. So what's this all about? Well, they came to us and said, hey, we need a chief technology officer, a chief engineering officer. We need somebody to be the guy that's going to build this ship, so to speak. Think of the Starship Enterprise from Star Trek. That's what we're talking about. The most complicated machine that's ever been built. And we've got the funding. We've got some of the smartest people on the planet as part of our team, but we need a master engineer to pull all the various pieces together. Think about building a nuclear submarine or an aircraft carrier or a huge chemical plant. Incredibly complex engineering with a lot of moving parts. We need somebody to be the point of the spear in bringing this all together. And our goal right now is to build what we're calling Spark. That is at the MIT campus right off, right around the corner from it, in partnership with the smartest guys out of MIT and a bunch of really smart brainiacs. Think of the Big Bang Theory on steroids. These guys are like that. They're all working together to build the first reactor. That's what they're calling Spark. And we need somebody to make sure that that goes off without a hitch from an engineering perspective. And then when that's done, they bought a coal energy plant in Virginia, and that's where we're going to build the ARC, the first commercially connected to the grid fusion plant. And the Spark is our prototype to proof of concept and to refine and to improve what we're doing. The ARC is where we go live commercial. And after we complete the ARC, we're going to be working with all the other competitors on helping them get their technology off the ground. And we're going to start commercializing these reactors we can start selling to Amazon, so next to their massive facilities, or to Elon Musk's Memphis facility right now that's an environmental polluter on steroids. All that gas that's being used to provide the energy for his Colossus, which is a massive complex, will go away with a fusion reactor that generates no carbon footprint. So we helped them go find the right people for that search. This again was like Nike. They had all the world's leading search firms wanting that search. They heard about us. They reached out to us and said, "We understand you guys do some really unique searches." We said, "Oh yeah, we got your back. We've done some of the most difficult searches on the planet." We put the executive director into Argonne's National Lab, which is the super collider up in Chicago, the big 3-mile underground circle. We put the executive director into that. We put the chief technology officer into Crane Currency, which is the only currency company on the planet. All currency is produced by the US government for us, right? And for Russia and China and all these other governments, they print all their own money, right? Nope. China, Russia, and America, they print some of their money. Crane Currency produces all the rest. And then for every other country on the planet, it's Crane Currency. Some of the most secret state-of-the-art technology on the planet. How do you keep counterfeiters from winning? Hire counterfeiters and people like that can create cutting-edge technology to make cash impossible to counterfeit. Well, the counterfeiters keep catching up, so you have to keep ahead of them. So we put the head of that organization in. And we've done many searches. I spent a half hour talking about some of the coolest searches on the planet we've done. A company out of Israel that makes a 3D printer that can print a chip that you can take off the printer and plug into a fighter jet, and it works.
That's your next book, The Craziest Searches.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, yeah. I can tell stories.
Each page is like a different chapter of a different company. That's fascinating.
So many technologies that people take for granted, like the glasses you have on. Are yours photochromics? If you go outside, they turn into sunglasses?
No.
Seen those, haven't you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, I helped the company PPG build that company with world-class scientists before that existed. And I give an hour talking about some of the coolest technology platforms that didn't exist until I helped these companies bring these teams together and made it exist. So Commonwealth Fusion is one of the coolest searches we've ever done. It's solved now. The guys now joined. And yeah, so pretty exciting time. So our legacy will be hopefully here in about 3 to 5 more years that we can say that spark happened not only because they had a great team, but we helped them bring an A player in to take it to the next level.
Patrick, first of all, thank you for sharing that. It's just fascinating. The last topic I want to cover is you kind of started on an unlikely path. So talk about martial arts and how that relates to kind of the beginning of your journey in a sense.
Yeah. So when I was 15 years old, I moved out. We can do a lot of that, but I had an incredibly challenging father, to say the least. And he was driving me nuts, and we were about to kill each other because we couldn't stand each other. He couldn't stand my personality, and I couldn't stand his. So at 15 years old, I said I had enough. I moved out, and I moved into a martial arts studio that was a live-in dormitory, much like the TV show Kung Fu. And it was run by a 10th degree black belt who had come over.
First of all, how'd you even hear about this? Like you could have
in Madison, Wisconsin, where I grew up.
Moved in with a friend, a family member.
And this is a little bit different. There was this 10th degree black belt that came over from South Korea when the North Korean and South Korean War occurred. His father immigrated to the U.S. and became a U.S. citizen and brought him with as a young guy who went to college in Madison, Wisconsin. Ended up becoming a top leader in the university while he also started a karate studio. And it grew because he was a 10th degree into another studio and another one. And then he bought this huge old brownstone a big castle-like building from the Madison, Wisconsin school district that they had abandoned and hadn't used in years. It was an elementary, middle, and high school all in one. In this castle-like brownstone, multi-story, huge building. He bought it for pennies on the dollars and turned it into the first live-in dormitory in the country for martial artists. Only black belts could live there. And he had 40 rooms that he had turned into dormitories. He took these huge classrooms and turned them into dormitories, two-level dormitories. And he had enough room for 40 kids to live in there. And they were all black belts who were primarily college kids who were going to the University of Wisconsin. And me. I didn't have my black belt yet, but I was on the fast curve. I'd already been taking karate for a couple of years with him. He really liked me when I told him that I was running away, basically. He reached out to my mom and talked to her about, hey, would you mind if he just came here? I'll become his legal guardian. I'll take care of him. He's best friends with my son, who is a little older, in his 20s, who's a black belt. And would that be something you'd consider as a place to keep him safe? Because Pat's got a lot of issues at this point. He's very angry. He's dangerously, incredibly tough, super fast, a little miniature version of Bruce Lee. He's going to end up in prison if you don't get him into a place where he can grow safely and get his anger under control. And he wasn't wrong. I was having some serious rage issues because of what was going on in my home. And so he took me under his wing. His son lived there, so his son was there to kind of keep a close eye on me. But his son was pretty wild too. And imagine 40 black belts who are in their 20s to 30s and how wild that environment was. It was insane. I grew up pretty fast, survived, got my ass whooped a whole bunch by some pretty tough guys that thought I was a smart ass with a big mouth, and they weren't wrong. But I had a blast. And I ended up getting my black belt at about 18. And then going out with some of the guys that I met there and starting another school of our own in a community outside of Madison, and then another one, and then another one. And then we started saying, you know what, karate, weightlifting, jazzercise, tanning, boy, we could do all sorts of stuff. Let's make a world-class health club, and let's call it National Fitness Centers. I'm like, what are you talking about? We just have 3 little schools in the middle of nowhere in Wisconsin. You want to call it National Fitness Centers? I said, yeah, think and grow rich. Let's surround ourselves with some of the smartest people we can find. Let's be A players that attract other A players, and let's build this into a national chain. And we started rocking and rolling and taking off. And the only problem we ran into is we're all young. This is the 80s. The cocaine highway flowed from Miami into Chicago, into Madison, everywhere around us. And we were all partying way too much. And the principal founder, who was probably 35 years old, was the head of the school, ended up with some bad habits and blew the whole thing up. And so I said, there's a lesson in that. It's one thing to party. It's another thing to party with somebody who's insane. I'm done. I pulled the plug. I'd invested a bunch of my own money. I said, I got to move on before I end up in some serious trouble with this guy. And his whole business, the whole thing imploded. And then I went off and went to night school and got into copier sales and did really well in Madison and then Milwaukee in copier sales. And that's when I said, like I said at the very beginning of the story, that I went to a headhunter and said, I want to do something else. I've done a bunch of entrepreneurial stuff. I've been in sales. I'd like to do that again, but something different. And here we are now, 40 years later, headhunting, company search, private equity. And by the way, I never finished a degree.
Is there any of those schools still around in Madison? Are they close to the campus? As you know, I went to University of Wisconsin, Madison. So obviously not a black belt or anything. So they wouldn't have let me live there, but that would have been fun to check it out.
When you were on the university, they had Pake's Academy of Martial Arts scattered around the university, different small schools. Do you ever run into one of those? Mm-mm. So they were Pake's, Dr. Sankey Pake's schools that his black belts would go start. And he would, kind of like church planting. He was school planting all these little schools all over the Madison area.
I love it. Yeah. First of all, so it comes full circle to how this all got started. Patrick, I just want to thank you. Thanks for sharing your journey, your stories, your wisdom. Everyone could check out Ropella360.com to learn more. And we'll see everyone next time. Patrick, thanks so much.
Thank you, Jeremy. Greatly appreciate it. It was fun.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.